editor-in-chief of Bon Appetit magazine has resigned amid questions about equality within the company. Adam Rappaport announced he is leaving the job he's held for a decade. This after several employees with Bon Appetit spoke out, saying the magazine is not inclusive and does not treat minorities equally. One assistant food editor said her salary was much lower than her colleagues, and while she appeared in the magazine's popular YouTube videos, only the white editors were paid for their appearances.
This is our first negative review in a long time. A meal at this restaurant costs $700 per person with a wine pairing. This is our 6th time dining here. They recently just got an additional Michelin star, so now they have 2. But believe it or not, our experience here for the first time since having 2 stars was actually the most negative one. First up, we noticed the wine pairing seemed a bit off, disjointed. Pours came at awkward times, and the choice to pair the wine with that dish was never clearly conveyed, which for $200 you expect to get a sense of why each wine was chosen for that specific dish, but this never happened. Another aspect we didn't enjoy was our friend, who was the only woman in our group, was told she would be getting smaller portions. We know this is a common practice in some places for omakase, but she didn't ask for it, and if the price also hasn't been adjusted to account for the smaller portions, then everyone should receive the same amount. Lastly, Tiago was getting full by the end of the meal. The last piece placed in front of him was a chutoro nigiri, which Tiago politely said would be his last piece. And this next part is really why we won't be back. Tiago was reaching for the piece so I could eat it when the chef snatched it up before he could and threw it in the trash right in front of us. We were all pretty taken aback by it. We discussed this with the team after the meal, and they told us this was done because a piece of nigiri can't sit out for more than a few seconds or it goes bad. Of course, that's just a really bad excuse. No piece of food is going to spoil in a matter of seconds. The mindfulness of how we consume food and what we waste is really important, and to see food being snatched up like this and thrown in the trash was pretty shocking. So unfortunately, Sushi Naz is definitely not worth the special trip it once was.
The average American spends over $2,500 a year at restaurants. In Philadelphia alone, the restaurant industry reported 2007 revenues of $2.3 billion. When it comes to a memorable restaurant experience, restaurant diners do not hesitate to spend money. The dollar price of a restaurant meal is paid for at the end of the night, but most people have no idea just how expensive the social cost of eating out is. Whether we know it or not, we as restaurant diners are intimately connected to restaurant workers. We rely on them to cook our food, serve it in a memorable way, and then clean up after us. However, while we focus on the food presented before us, we pay little attention to the waiters, the cooks, the dishwashers, and all the other restaurant workers who make our meal possible. Who are these people? How are they treated? What are the problems they face? What price do they pay so that we can enjoy our meal? The money that diners expect to go into the pockets of restaurant workers often gets stolen by their employers.
Back of the house workers is they're just massively underpaid. So as a good example, I have a client who recently came in. He worked at a pizza restaurant and he was paid $400 a week for 69 hours of work. And that comes out to about $6 an hour. And that's $6 an hour if you're paid $6 an hour for every hour you work, if you're not getting the overtime premium. If he worked 69 hours, I don't remember exactly what the calculation is, but he should be getting around $630, $640 every single week. So that means every week that this guy was working, he was being underpaid by $200+.
And we'll work on our feeling that
she's the face of a multi-million-dollar empire built on Southern cooking and a folksy image. Paula Deen's vast portfolio includes TV shows, restaurants, and deals with some of the nation's biggest retailers, including Kmart and Target. But Deen is now doing damage control. After she admitted in a deposition that she had used racial slurs, the revelation ignited a firestorm and prompted the Food Network to drop her.
Ramsay has built an empire on gastronomic genius.
And teach you how to cook amazing food.
I never screamed like that in real life, you know. I was all acting.
Only in the bedroom.
Gordon Ramsay is under fire after that 2010 clip resurfaced.
These former employees at his latest LA eatery, the Fat Cow, claim there's a kitchen nightmare right here under his nose, and they're taking him to court, claiming, among other things, that they were forced to work grueling 8-hour shifts without a break.
I think there comes with certain responsibility when you have your name on an establishment.
You chip idiot. I asked for one nominee and why.
You want a fucking jacket? You want to talk some shit? Let's go step outside, motherfucker. I don't need this or that. I don't need some limey fucking prick talking to me like that. Without skipping a beat, go back home, I'll work. Anybody would fucking hire me to work in their kitchen, and they'd be proud to have me there. Fuck him. Fuck him.
That's definitely something I can speak to, being on Hell's Kitchen twice, and everyone's always like, you should go a third time. I said, absolutely not, because it takes years to rebuild your image when you go on a reality TV show that has certain characters in mind that they mold. You know, they only show, if you're watching a 30-minute episode, they're only seeing a small portion of your personality. And people take that and they run with it, right? So I can definitely understand that she's like, no, on the bigger and better things. I'm not returning backwards, because again, rebuilding your image, once you get the ball rolling on that, you're unstoppable.
I want everybody to realize that you can do anything, and we can absolutely all be mentors for each other. Being a woman and a chef, I feel like it was harder to get where I wanted to be. And I don't really take disrespect or being looked down on at all. I never take it from anybody, and I never have. I feel responsible for the future women that come into our kitchen. I want everybody to make sure that they are being able to give out their best at all times. We come from a place of love and compassion and kindness. As a woman in a kitchen, I didn't get that ever when I was younger. And it hasn't been until recently that the restaurant industry has been changing to harness more of that. And so,
as an ice cream maker, he took inspiration from his culture to change the ice cream game at his shop in Cape Town, South Africa.
For the first 8 years, I never made a single African flavor. Then one day I saw some things from home, like popped maize, like maputi, some peanuts, and I was like, oh, what if I put that into ice cream? And it was the first time I made ice cream that spoke to my identity and my history, and I was like, I should make more like this.
Lack of cultural representation in ice cream flavors was something other Africans say they noticed too.
Growing up, we knew that ice cream can be vanilla, something that is just not from here. Now, if you eat something like Sam, it's something that we grew up eating. At the same time, it's it just makes you connect. It connects you with your childhood.
Guza's inventive flavors like pumpkin and peanut butter or rooibos tea with sweet potato jam have customers coming back to try something new every time.
To eat an ice cream with African flavors is just so heartwarming. I mean, to be on the continent, to be experiencing flavors that are from here.
そうですね。特に最近私が9年ぐらいやっていて、思うのは女性のやっぱりリーダーシップ教育とかお寿司の教育そのものをまずは変えていこうと思っています。やっぱり今のルールだとやっぱ男性社会で作られてきたHey
guys, welcome to my channel. It's me here, Comrade Lavender here, and I'm back with another YouTube anti-capitalism true crime deep dive topic. Today I want to talk about the pure evil, the culinary world, culinary industry, and food restaurant industry files. Deep dive, capitalism, racism, wage theft, true crime, etc. Before we get started into this YouTube video, all my YouTube videos related to this topic will be on the screen right now if you'd like to check them out. So let's get started into this YouTube video topic. Racism in the culinary industry, the stories of Black people in this industry. For a cook, sharing recipes, ideas, and inspiration is definitely well suited to a video format. However, these opportunities are not often extended equally to everyone. Discrimination in the cooking industry, especially where TV and video are involved, has stifled the creativity of diverse contributors since the field's inception. Paula Deen's lawsuit, Bon Appétit scandal, and the controversies surrounding various restaurants are just a couple of the more high-profile incidents. In March of 2012, Lisa Jackson, the former manager of Uncle Bubba's Seafood and Oyster House, owned by Food Network star Paula Deen and her brother, filed a lawsuit against Deen and her brother for racism and sexual harassment. She explained that Black employees were held to a higher standard of performance, were called demeaning names, were required to use separate bathrooms and entrances than white colleagues. Deen's brothers often made racist remarks and sexual comments, which Paula was accused of enabling. Paula admitted to wanting her brother's wedding to have black tap dancers to simulate a time when black people waited on white people and to say the N-word. Yet Deen stars today in the latest season of MasterChef on Food Network. Restaurants here flourished after the Civil War, a period when black people in the hospitality sector was still technically working for free due to the widespread adoption of tipping, which allows employers to avoid paying their workers. Racism literally shaped the restaurant landscape too. Here on Long Island, the racist practice of redlining preventing black restaurateurs from obtaining business loans or leasing buildings in particular towns, and thus denied them the same opportunities as their white counterparts. The effects of such discrimination have been everlasting, something that they have learned firsthand as a black server and diner. In the 6 years I've worked in restaurants, I never saw a person of color, black, indigenous, and people of color in management or even a black bartender. Most people of color were forced to remain in the back of the house, washing dishes, bussers, or runners in the front of the house. As a diner, I've seen how the industry's culture of discrimination plays out from the other side of the table too. One evening, while I was training a server at a farm-to-table restaurant, I asked the trainer how she made recommendations. And they said, well, they're Asian, so I recommend the octopus because Asians eat weird food. She said, the table we just served. Excuse me? I replied sternly. She tried to backpedal and say something how Italian guys also loved octopus. Months later, I caught one of the managers and two servers discussing the treatment of black people as it relates to our work ethic. The manager implied that there were times we were treated better than we deserved because of our skin color. The two servers looked shocked, but neither corrected her. Being the only black employee and server of color, I quit immediately. Although the guests at the restaurant usually treated me with respect, I was degraded on several occasions. One evening, while I was recommending wine to a table, one of the diners, a white man, winked at me and said, the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice, am I right? There was so much I wanted to say, especially to his wife who just laughed nervously. Instead, I recommended the wine and walked away. Who could I tell? If a manager wouldn't be checked, how would I guess? I stayed at the restaurant for a year and a half. Shortly before my departure, one of the customers, a senior citizen, grabbed me. He said, you know what they say about black women, he whispered in my ear. You taste like chocolate. He then attempted to kiss me. I pulled away, but I didn't want to hurt him. I could already imagine the news headline, Black server abused elderly white man at Long Island restaurant. So again I walked away, but this time I cried in the hallway. While my coworker consoled me, other coworkers seemed to think I was overreacting, as if the customer had only given me a compliment. I didn't have the energy to point out that black women are neither a fetish nor a fantasy, and that the sexual harassment we often experience is linked in the ways we've been hypersexualized throughout history. While the restaurant clientele was genuinely kind, there was still the middle-aged white men thinking they were Tupac, telling me I was the prettiest black girl they've ever seen, and the white woman who felt the need to be down when I approached the table. Hey girl, one of them told me, your makeup is on fleek, we're trying to get lit. Know that I'm laughing at you, I thought. You sound like Lynn from 30 Rock. You are 45 years old in a Talabot pantsuit. Please stop. Discrimination in the kitchen has come to light in other restaurants as well. Kami Ashui, a cook at 11 Madison Park, described the racist behavior he experienced in the kitchen from Chef Christ Flint in March 2019. Ashui asked Flint not to refer to a specific grader as it is common name Maui in front of the customer, since it was historically a racist slur used by Italians against black people. Flint made light of the situation and told him, no black people come here anyways. When you're black in America, racism is a constant, and this woman, who is a queer black woman working in restaurants, she's experienced all of it firsthand. Sometimes it's action and sometimes it's words, but it all comes from the same place. Much like black chefs themselves, soul food has never gotten the respect it deserves. People play down the influence of African Americans had on the food of the U.S. and try to take our traditions away from us. They cook soul food and they call it Southern food instead. But the whole sustainability thing got big. I watched the dishes we've been cooking for centuries become popular items on the all-white Southern chefs' menus as if they never existed before. All these cast-offs we grew up on, neck bones, oxtails, and hog heads, were disgusted and called different names. I'd be at a festival with all these top chefs serving pork terrine on peppery crackers or whatever, and I'm like, okay girl, this is the same stuff all over the country people are boiling in big black kettles at the cookout. As black chefs, we're always being asked to explain ourselves. We have to explain why I'm putting macaroni in my paella, even though I learned that from a lady in northern Spain who does the same exact thing as me. And then if we stick to what we grew up on, we get asked, why is your food always soul food? Is that all you can cook? Is that all you can do? Nobody asks an Italian chef that. Maybe the question should be, how do you do what you do? I'll say it now flat out. I left D-Cure because of the racism. All those microaggressions over the course of my career, racism. It may be more insidious than getting knocked out by a cop. It may be dressed up in a nice liberal clothing, but that doesn't make it any less racist. I'm done being nice and quiet about that. I'm done sugarcoating the ugly truths because at 6 years old, I no longer fear the repercussions of honesty. You don't have to stand for this. In United States restaurants, bars, and food trucks, modern-day capitalism, slavery, and human trafficking persists. In U.S. restaurants, bars, and food trucks, they come from places like Vietnam, China, Mexico, and Guatemala, lured by the promises of better-paying jobs and legal immigration. Instead, they're smuggled into the United States, forced to work around the clock as bussers, waitstaff, and cooks, and housed in cramped, unhygienic living quarters. For this, they must pay exorbitant fees that must be an insurmountable debt, even as their pay is often withheld, wage theft, or stolen or unfairly docked. In restaurants, bars, and food trucks across America, many workers are entrapped in a form of modern-day capitalism slavery. Of the more than 1,700 restaurant industry cases, the vast majority of the victims involved immigrants recruited from Mexico, Central America, and East and Southeast Asia. Nearly 1 in 5 was a minor. They include cooks, waitstaff, bussers at restaurants, food trucks, buffets, and taquerias. Traffickers often take advantage of language barriers between exploited workers and patrons. Some victims were forced to provide both sex and labor. Women from Latin America, including many minors, came to America, beguiled by promises of good wages, safe migration, or even a romantic relationship. They're put to work selling drinks and sex at bars, says Jennifer Palmrose, data analysis director for Polaris and co-author of the report. Many times, there are legitimate bars and restaurants where they'll sell alcohol, often at inflated prices, but behind the scenes, forced commercial sex trafficking may occur on-site or nearby at a hotel or warehouse. In the motel, she says, traffickers tend to be part of a large criminal organization. Gordon Ramsay's show, like Hell's Kitchen, a verbal abuse history. Fine dining kitchens are infamous for physical and mental abuse and toxic work environments. As sociologists who study the culinary industry world and its workers, we recently published research showing that many kitchen staffers come to view mistreatment and abuse as a mundane and often inevitable part of working in restaurant industry. Studies have also shown that learning to endure violence can increase the chances of repeated abuse, as well as the incorporation of unproductive behaviors into victimized workers' own actions. The latter can look like he's adopting abusive behaviors themselves or engaging in small acts of damaging rebellion, like sneaking a swig of cooking wine here or slowing the pace of work there. Cruelly, enduring violence unintentionally aids in the process of making violent behavior feel and seem normal in the workplace, so a cycle of violence perpetuates and reverberates, embedding itself deeper into the fabric of the restaurant kitchen industry. Often being passed down from one generation of cooks to the next, workers began to expect it. Grant, a cook we interviewed, explained the abuse is normalized and sometimes romanticized as well. Bleeding wounds castorized on scorching hobs, abuse hurled from toque-donning, speckled flanked tyrants, unrelenting physical and mental torment set to a backdrop of fire-belching plans. No, this isn't some kind of culinary, psychological thriller / body horror. This is actual real daily life as revealed by a recent study into the extreme bullying in fine dining kitchens across the UK and Britain. According to the findings, physical danger and violence don't just persist in some kitchens, they're part of the very fabric of fine dining kitchen culture. These range from proving how macho you are to horrific violence. Chefs in the study told stories of doing stuff like covering their hand in flour and eggs and seeing who could stick it in the fryer for the longest, as well as senior chefs holding a knife to an underlining throat and screaming, "I'm gonna fucking kill you all." The Instagram account Hospitality Bullshit features plenty of more examples of chefs who suffered horribly in UK kitchens. The purpose of the account was to provide somewhere for victims to come forward to tell their story, so it could be published, their testimonials, and tag abusers directly. And those testimonials are grim, really grim. One chef says they ended up with 2 broken knuckles and being called a useless cunt. Another was branded with a searing hot oven tray when they tried to quit their job. Hospitality Bullshit hasn't posted anything since August 2021, but its testimonials remain published for all to see. With all those witness accounts, you can read more. There's no denying that the climate of fear in UK kitchens. Gordon Ramsay, verbal abuse in kitchens, the commercialization and glorification of celebrity chef abuse. The multi-Michelin-starred chef and restaurateur owns restaurants across the world and also has made a name for himself through various television, TV shows, and engagements. Where reality begins to blur, however, is the disconnect between his personality on screen versus in real life. Hell's Kitchen, amongst other shows, portrays Gordon Ramsay as a violent, aggressive, verbal bully, to say the least. As such, the back of the house workers he manages are not only subjected to constant verbal and mental abuse, but are portrayed as understanding that this is just part of the job. You can't forget the bread, Gordon Ramsay says, and no pain, no grain. The 3rd episode of the current season of Next Level Chef on Fox and Hulu, otherwise you're an idiot sandwich. The line is a callback to the meme where Chef holds 2 bread slices around talk show host Julie Chen's head in a 2015 late-night sketch, making her the so-called dummy on a bun. Amazingly, after more than 2 decades of yelling at people on television and TV shows, Gordon Ramsay is still Gordon Ramsaying. He's committed to the same bit and now spans over 20 shows, from his early days in Hell's Kitchen through the Kitchen Nightmares and MasterChef eras, and now on Next Level Chef. In 2009, Ramsay made the mistake of aiming sexist and misogynistic insults at Australian television host Tracy Grimshaw. Gordon Ramsay's hit TV show Gordon Ramsay Uncharted on National Geographic ignores a history of colonization. Television chef Gordon Ramsay has had a culinary show. According to Variety, the National Geographic Channel greenlit Gordon Ramsay Uncharted, a series that has the chef traveling the world to investigate and try other food cultures and try to show locals he can master their food better than they can. When the show first was in its preview in a press release, the episodes are described as Gordon Ramsay's attempt at unlocking a culture's culinary secrets through exploration and adventure with local food heroes, tracking down high traditions, pastimes, and customs that are specific to that region in hopes of discovering the undiscovered and finally testing Ramsay against the locals, putting his own interpretations of regional dishes against the true classics. Despite the series' attempts to showcase international cuisine and food, its premise ignores how colonization has led to the whitewashing of many cultures. The language used to describe the components of the show, including discovering and unlocking a culture's secrets, can be linked back to the pillaging of various countries by European entities. Several commenters had negative reactions to the direction of the show, critiquing the white privilege. One user wrote, "Who thought let's send a belligerent, verbal abusive, angry British white man to school local chefs about their own cuisine would be a good idea." Hell's Kitchen employees allege Gordon Ramsay's restaurant segregated black diners. A group of servers walked out over claims of a hostile work environment. 11 employees of Gordon Ramsay's Hell's Kitchen at the Werdoff in D.C. walked out on Labor Day following allegations of a toxic and racist work environment. The claim led host segregated black customers in what allegedly referred to as the ghetto side of the dining room, with lesser views. They also alleged that one of the managers created a hostile workplace, calling some employees incompetent bitches. When the employees demanded the manager be put on investigation leave before they returned to work, Gordon Ramsay's corporate HR team suspended them. Many believed they've essentially been fired, but after Washington requested comment from Ramsay's restaurant group, they were asked to come back as HR continued its investigation. Employees say the manager was sent home the day after their walkout, but the company has declined to comment on the employment status of the specific employee in question. They spoke to 6 current and former employees who say they observed blatant racial segregation of the restaurant. They all asked to remain anonymous because they feared of retaliation. After Washington began reporting the story, the company sent employees a page-long memo warning them not to make unauthorized statements about the business to the media. Just as Gordon Ramsay's TV show Hell's Kitchen divides teams into red and blue, the color scheme of the restaurant is likewise split between red and blue dining to big suspenders. One server says he first noticed a racial divide in August after a colleague pointed out to him, "I walked on both sides of the restaurant, and of course it was true. There was only one black person sitting on the red side of the restaurant, and there were only white people sitting on the blue side, completely segregated. For a second, I just wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's just a night where the restaurant was just filled with one type of person." I just looked around and I'm like, oh, that's not the case. It looks like my section has been tampered with. He says as soon as he learned that many of his colleagues and employees had allegedly experienced the same thing. A third server says the racial segregation was also evident, but the server preferred to try to make the best of it because it was still a good job. I can tell you right now that right before closing, they're going to give one of the black servers a table of 7 people from inner city Baltimore, but they won't give it to those other people, the server says. The employees say that the guest seating chart at the time was determined by lead host Ingres Uleta. Through hosts do not control which section servers are assigned to. When the staff brought the segregation up, they say they observed to the attention of the general manager Natasha Mishani last month. She said she would investigate the situation. Several employees were interviewed by the restaurant's managers and supplied written statements detailing racist behavior they had witnessed. Some of those statements including allegations that Utrala called the red side of the restaurant the ghetto side, and that she referred to some black guests as the N-word. Afterwards, employees say Ugreta was removed from controlling the seating chart but continued to work as a host. They say guests are now seated more normally. One source says some people didn't initially speak up because Ugreta seemed to be friends with her supervisor. Multiple employees claim that the manager would unfairly punish minor mistakes by giving out disciplinary action write-ups or less lucrative shifts and selections. They also allege she had punched a wall on multiple occasions and verbally abused people. More problematic backlash. Gordon Ramsay has also faced anger over his decision to lay off 500 staff at his restaurants without pay during the coronavirus crisis. The celebrity chef, who boasts an estimated net worth of over $100 million, called staff to a meeting where they were told their contracts were being axed. Many of the 8 million workers who were displaced from the restaurant industry as a whole during the pandemic. the COVID-19 pandemic's early days are unlikely to reapply because of lingering anger over how they were treated, a new academic study shows. Perhaps the most high-profile controversy of the past year that involved racism was Condé Nast Bon Appetit. It began last May with BA's Instagram post that planned to address racial and political issues in the food culinary world. The post prompted current contributors to criticize its hypocrisy and to bring to light the toxic practices at the workplace. The cited incidents include resistance to story ideas involving diverse cuisines, photo surfacing of the editor-in-chief, Adam Reinport in brownface, and a post featuring a Confederate flag cake on an old personal blog of BA Drinks editor. Eventually it was revealed that there was a severe equal pay issue, that only white editors received pay for video appearances. Between the lack of equitable compensation for non-white contributors and the misrepresentation and underappreciation of stories from non-white backgrounds, many BA contributors left the publication. Several chefs who have been called out for disregarding the history behind certain cuisines in order to make recipes more palatable to whites. One example of this is Gordon Ramsay, who in February of 2019 faced backlash after calling his new restaurant The Lucky Cat, an authentic Asian restaurant without an Asian chef at the helm. Another example is Lucky Lee's, which came under fire in April 2019. Chef and health coach Ariel Haspel called it clean Chinese restaurant in advertisements. Many felt Haspel disregarded Chinese recipes by promoting testimonials about her restaurant that complained that Chinese food makes them feel bloated and icky, and wished for healthy Chinese food. Lucky Lee's advertisement seemed to insinuate that the alternative to her clean version was dirty, hole-in-the-wall, and unhealthy, long-standing stereotypes of Chinese food that had been fought against for over a century. Soul food is how Black people define ourselves and celebrate the stories of how we survived, and yet soul food's overwhelmingly cultural power presents a strong argument for re-examining it. Countless other people of color feel alienated for being vegan, even though their veganism may be rooted in a commitment to a community. In America, food has long been, or been mixed up with, Eugene of oppression, and the Black body serves as a constant reminder of it. Black people were enslaved because of our agriculture and culinary admin. Economic exploitation of traditional farm-to-factory farm laborers who are predominantly Black and Latino persists today. So does housing discrimination, which makes it hard for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color to shop for affordable, fresh fruit and vegetables near their homes. And sometimes there's food deserts. Soul food is how Black people define ourselves and celebrate the stories of how we survived. And yet, soul food's overwhelmingly cultural power presents a strong argument for again re-examining it. Are the stories we tell ourselves about traditional notions of soul food still useful? Is the idea of soul food really about the food itself, or rooted in the wisdom of the communities that created it? How might soul food be used to tell stories about who we want to become, and not only who we once were? I suggest we begin by decolonizing soul food, unearthing the ways white American stereotypes around Black food and culture have shaped our understanding of the cuisine of our Black ancestors. We don't have to look farther than Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben, stereotypes created to normalize segregation, and to see the influence of white assumptions about Black cookery. Delinking these images from our ideas about soul food helps us uncover knowledges that that have always existed in our margins. For instance, there is no static definition of what it means to eat the way that is Black. In his book Hog and Hominy, culinary historian Fred Douglass writes that what Americans think of traditional West African diet consisting of darker whole grains, dark green leafy vegetables, and colorful fruits and nuts, supplemented with meat, evolved because during slavery and its aftermath, Black folks had to eat what they were able to access. They had to learn how to make inexpensive cuts of meat that weren't that great taste wonderful. And if we think about the history of Black food as a window into surviving the racism that is fundamental to our domestic food system, we tap into deeper meanings that can be easily overlooked. We might say that what animates soul food isn't the chicken or the hog or the foodstuff in it of itself, but rather a spirit of preservation and promotion of the Black community, and its realization should prompt ethical reflection and response. I suggest that veganism, particularly Black and veganism, and other activists and I have described it, shows one powerful way. By opting to not consume animal products, Black veganism forces us to examine how the language of animality and animal characteristics has been a tool to justify the oppression of any being who deviates by species, race, or behavior from white cultural norms. By challenging the racist stereotypes within those norms, Black veganism invites us to learn more about the history and development of Black food and food culture beyond the terror that was slavery. Northwestern University did a study of the diversity of short cooking videos often seen on the Reels section of Instagram, filled with only a pair of anonymous hands. After analyzing 100 of these commercial food videos, only 6 of the videos depicted hands that were not light-skinned. Journalist Lorraine Chauvin studied the bylines of the New York Times cooking recipes and found that in each ethnic group labeled by the Times, 83% of the authors were white. These labels also had an extreme lack of nuisance, especially for African and Caribbean recipes. Food media, in general, tends to generalize different cuisines, disregard subcultures, and stereotype the region. It is clear that from the kitchen to the table to the TV, racism is plaguing the food industry and has been for many years. Food is such an integral way for cultures to be shared and celebrated. However, instead of majority chefs being the leaders and introducing the world to something new, they are perpetually overshadowed by the white curation and control of the industry. Now on to the environmental impact of the culinary and restaurant industry as a whole. The aroma of sizzling steaks and simmering sauces waves through the air while mountains of untouched food pile up in the kitchen, destined for the dumpsters instead of dinner's plates. The environmental and economic impact for food waste in the restaurant industry cannot be overstated or ignored. With billions of dollars and tons of greenhouse gas emissions going to waste each year. The USDA reports that annually the United States food loss and food waste embodies 170 million metric tons of carbon dioxide, equivalent to GHG emissions, to an annual CO2 emissions of 42 coal-fired powered plants. Food waste is a significant problem for the restaurant industry, and with an estimated 11.4 million tons of food being wasted every single year in the United States alone, 85% of food goes unused in a typical American restaurant, is thrown out, while only a small percentage is recycled or donated. Greenblue reports that half a pound of food is wasted per meal in restaurants, whether it's from what's left on a customer's plate or the kitchen itself. According to NPR, food waste from restaurants makes up 15% of all food that ends up in landfills. This is likely due to the fact that full-service restaurants typically have more complex menus, which can lead to more food waste. Similarly, restaurants that offer buffets or self-service options can also generate a large, significant amount of food waste, as customers often take more food than they can eat. According to a 2016 Refed report, nearly 40% of food waste is generated by customer-serving business models like hotels and the hotel industry as a whole, because buffets have a prepare for an unpredictable amount and number of customers each day. At the end of the day, they have a significant surplus of food that gets wasted, especially from the hotel industry. From an environmental perspective, food waste contributes to greenhouse gas emissions in the form of landfill waste. When food waste is sent to a landfill, it decomposes and releases methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Methane is estimated to have a global warming potential that is 28 times greater than the carbon dioxide over a 100-year period, contributing to the climate change crisis. Globally, landfills and wastewater emit 67 million metric tons of methane gas. That's 20% of methane emissions, according to the United Nations. Not to mention all the plastic pollution and the air pollution emitting from the kitchens in the restaurant industry.